What's up, guys? Thanks for tuning in. It's Teague with Battle City Games. I'm here today with a post Dawn of Majesty Gusto deck profile. As always, if you enjoy the content, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our other videos, and please give us that thumbs up if you enjoy it so that we know to keep giving you more profiles. Alright, let's go ahead and dive on in. Alright, so today we're going to be looking at a competitive Gusto deck profile. That's right, I used the words competitive and Gusto in the same sentence without the words unable to be in there as well. Dawn of Majesty gave this deck some awesome new support that really allows it to be much more consistent and more explosive. So let's go ahead and dive on in. Now first up, it's going to be the honorary Gusto monster, and that's going to be triple copies of Win, the Wind Channeler. She is not a Gusto card, but she is absolutely amazing support for any wind-based deck. She has the ability that you can discard herself and one of her wind monster to add one wind monster with 1500 or less defense from your deck to your hand, except another copy of herself, and then she does lock you into wind monsters for the rest of the turn. And then she also has another effect that if a wind monster you control is destroyed by battle while she's in your hand, you can special summon her, and then you can only use each effect once per turn. So we're really primarily just concerned with that first effect, because she's going to allow us to search pretty much all of our Gusto monsters that we want. So she's just a great consistency boost, and since we are pretty much only playing wind monsters, except for a few exceptions, we don't really care about that restriction that she places on us either. So 3 copies, great for the deck for consistency. Next up is going to be Pilica, the Descendant of Gusto. This is an older Gusto card, but one of the best pieces of support that they've gotten. She has the ability that when she is normal or special summoned, you can target one wind tuner in your graveyard, special summon it in face-up defense position with its effects negated, and then if you activate that effect, you are once again locked into wind monsters. So just a great card. She's a 1-card synchro, and thanks to some of the new support, it's easier than ever to get your Gusto monsters into the graveyard. And then for the last Psychic Gusto monster we're playing, it's going to be the 1 Cam Serenity of Gusto. She's a level 4 that says once per turn, you can return 2 Gusto monsters from your graveyard to the deck to draw 1 card. She's good to bring out after you kind of cycled through some of your Gusto monsters to get some additional resources into your hand, or if you just need a little bit more powerful monster to push some damage through, or if you're going for a level 5 synchro, or depending on what level you're trying to go through. And that's going to do it for all of our Psychic Gusto monsters. Pilica is so powerful that we don't really need to focus on any of the other Gusto Psychics, because honestly none of them are very good. Moving on into our Winged Beasts, we start off with 3 of the brand new Gusto Vidir. This card does so much for the deck, it's really kind of what they needed in monster form. So it is a level 3 Winged Beast tuner. It says if a face-up Gusto monster on the field is destroyed by battle or sent to your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. If this card is normal or special summoned, you can send 1 Gusto monster from your deck to the graveyard, and then you can special summon 1 Gusto monster from your hand, and you can only use each effect once per turn. So what's important to keep in mind here is that if you send a Gusto monster from your field to the graveyard for any reason, that will trigger Vidir. So if you Synchro Summon, you Link Summon, anything like that, if a Gusto monster went to the graveyard, you can trigger that Vidir in your hand. And he's really doing 2 things for you. 1, he's getting Gusto monsters into your graveyard for you to potentially revive off of Pilica or to shuffle back with something like Cam. And he's also extending your plays by special summoning out a Gusto from your hand to the field. And the entire strategy of this particular build of the deck is really to use Daigusto's Freeze's effect, their level 6 Synchro monster, to OTK your opponent by dealing mass amounts of damage by crashing your Gusto monsters. So being able to extend with Vidir to get other Gusto monsters on board is very important. Then for our next Gusto monster, it is one of the only Winged Beasts that is not a tuner, and that is Gusto Griffin at 3 copies. This card got a lot better with the advent of the Wind Channeler, as well as the new Gusto spell. He's a level 2 that says if he is sent from your hand to the graveyard, you can special summon one Gusto monster from your deck, and you can only use this effect once per turn. So the idea here is, of course, to discard him off of Win to search, and then also get that additional special summon, or to discard him off of a brand new Gusto Tailwind, which you'll see here in a moment, and then get the search that way as well. Just a lot of ways in the deck overall to get into the graveyard, and a very useful card to make sure that you're able to get monsters to the board without having to rely on your normal summon solely. Then for the other wing beast, we have 2 copies of Gusto Eagle. Eagle is a level 1 tuner that says if he's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 4 or lower non-tuner Gusto monster. So 9 times out of 10, that'll probably be your Pilica, but it can also be your Griffin or your Cam as well. Just whatever you happen to need on board at the time. But again, the idea is we're going to be crashing him into our opponent's monsters to trigger that effect and deal mass amounts of damage since he is only 200 attack. Then we are also playing 2 copies of Gusto Goldo. This is a level 3 tuner that says if it is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can special summon one level 2 or lower Gusto monster from your deck. So Goldo is really good here because he will trigger no matter how he is sent to the graveyard. So again, if you use him for a Synchro Summon or a Link Summon, he can trigger. Do keep in mind that he is a win effect, unfortunately, so he can miss timing if he's not the last thing to happen. So you just need to keep that in mind, but still a very powerful card for the deck. And then moving into our non-Gusto engine, we've chosen to go with the Speedroid engine. I have seen a lot of people go with the Wind Witch engine, which is perfectly viable, but my issue with that is the Wind Witch engine is only really useful when you don't have any monsters on board, because you need to be able to special summon out your Wind Witches, whereas the Speedroid engine actually works in tandem with having wind monsters on board. So if you say summon your Pilica or your Vidir, and your opponent thinks they're going to hit it with an Ash Blossom or an Imperm and kind of stop your plays, you can then continue to use the Speedroids to extend your plays further out. And honestly, they have some really powerful effects as long as you don't care about being locked into wind monsters. So we've got the triple copies of Tactumborg that you see here. He can special summon himself out if you control any wind monster. And then he also has the added bonus that you can tribute him to special summon one Speedroid tuner monster from your deck. That second effect does lock you into wind monsters, but again, we don't care about that. And then we have the one Terratop, of course. This one, if you do control no monsters, you can kind of special summon him out as your first play, and either bait something like the Ash Blossom, or just immediately be able to special summon out one of your Speedroid monsters, and then potentially go into something like a Gossip Shadow, to make sure that you don't have to worry about cards like Nibiru or any other disruption from your opponent. And then the last card that I decided to go with is actually one I was looking through the Speedroid archetype to try to find the best Speedroid tuner. And I think for this particular deck, Card Turbo is a fantastic addition. It's a level 3 machine tuner that says if you control a wind monster, you can special summon it from your hand. And then, again, you're locked into wind effects for the rest of a turn. And also, if it's in your graveyard, you can banish itself and one Speedroid monster from your graveyard to make all wind monsters you currently control gain 800 attack until the end of a turn. So 2 important things here. First, the ability to special summon itself out. That means that none of these cards are bricks if you open up with them. Tactumborg is an extender, Speedroid Terratop is a starter, and Card Turbo, again, is just a great extender. So they all will be live no matter what you open up with. And then that second effect of Card Turbo, honestly, to banish to boost your wind monsters by 800 attack, can really allow you to push through some extra damage if you need to, and can kind of catch your opponents off guard as well. So that's the sub-engine we're going with to kind of complement the Gusto engine. Moving on to the, I guess you could call them the hand traps of the deck. We are playing triple copies of Nibiru, the Primal Being. This is a going second deck, guys, because we are trying to get that OTK through. And none of our Gusto cards really negate anything. They just facilitate damage. So we don't really want to go first because we're not going to end on a very impressive board in a lot of cases. So we go second, and Nibiru is just a great option to disrupt your opponent's plays while making sure that they have a big monster on their board potentially that you can sink some damage into when your turn comes around. And then for the Suedo hand traps, we are running 2 Godarla, the Mystery Dust Kaiju, and 1 Thunder King, the Lightning Kaiju. The Godarlas we went with because they are wind, so they do fit with all of our restrictions. And then the Thunder King, while he's not wind, he is a 3300 attack, which means we can push through more damage than we could with a Godarla. Just make sure if he's the Kaiju you happen to have in hand, that you special summon him first before you activate any of your effects that would lock you into wind monsters, which usually isn't a problem because 9 times out of 10 you're going to want a Kaiju first to remove a negate or any other potential threat from your opponent's board. So that's going to do it for the monsters, guys. Let's move on into the spells. First up is going to be triple copies of a brand new Tailwind of Gusto. I can't believe that Konami gave this card to Gustos and then that they made it a common. This card is absolutely ridiculous. It's an equip spell that says it can only be equipped to a Gusto monster. The equipped monster cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and then you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. If this card is in your graveyard, you can banish it and discard 1 wind monster to add 1 Gusto spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So this can add itself, but we are also playing 1 other target. And then its second effect says you can activate this effect based on the level of the monster this card is equipped to. If the level is 4 or lower, you get to special summon 1 Gusto monster from your deck with a different type than the equipped monster. So if it's equipped to a Psychic, you can get one of your Winged Beasts and vice versa. And then if it's 5 or higher, you just get to special summon 1 level 1 tuner from your deck. So, like I said, really amazing card. That first effect is great because if we get this into the graveyard, we can banish it to discard a card, which will hopefully be our Griffin, to also trigger our Griffin. And then we can just grab another copy of itself or the next card I'm about to show you. And then that ability to just special summon from the deck for free is great because a lot of times what you'll be doing is you'll activate your Tailwind, equip it to a monster, special summon out whatever Gusto you need, synchro, and then when Tailwind ends up in the graveyard, you'll be able to banish it to activate that second effect. So really amazing card here, guys. Absolutely fantastic support. And then for the other Gusto spell or trap we're running, that's going to be 1 contact with Gusto. So this is a normal spell that says target 2 Gusto monsters in your graveyard and 1 card your opponent controls. Shuffle both targets in your graveyard into the deck and then destroy the opponent's target. So it is the weakest kind of removal, which is targeting destruction. But I wanted to have another target to search off of Tailwind of Gusto, because if you've already used both effects of Gusto or Tailwind that turn, yes, you can get the second copy for a follow-up play, but I wanted to have another option to maybe help clear up my opponent's board, and Contact with Gusto does that. In most cases, by the time you get to this card, you'll definitely have the 2 Gustos in graveyard to meet its activation requirements. And this is just another way to either bait out a negate or remove a potentially pesky problem from your opponent's board. Just another option that you can grab off of Tailwind, and I wanted to have at least 1 other target. And then for some of the other spells, we do have triple copies of Foolish Burial Goods. This is just to get your Tailwind to the graveyard, since Tailwind can act as a starter to get you any Gusto monster you may need. And this essentially just gives you 6 copies of the card then. And then again, since we're going second deck, we are playing triple copies of Lightning Storm. Luckily, with the reprint in King's Court, this card is much more accessible than it used to be. But this will just allow us, if we're playing against a back row deck, maybe something like Eldritch, for example, or Sky Striker, we can shotgun this right off the bat to clear out any back row threats we might face. Or, if not, we can use it on our opponent's monsters to either bait out a negate or clear their board to just allow us to push through for an OTK. And then for the last 2 spells in the deck, we have 1 Emergency Teleport and 1 Monster Reborn. Pilica's a level 3 Psychic monster that doesn't care whether she's normal or special summon, so Emergency Teleport, of course, makes perfect sense. And Monster Reborn is just a good extender It can help you to bring back something to either push more damage or maybe keep your plays going if your opponent disrupted you at some point. And there are no traps in the deck, so that's going to do it for the main deck, guys. Let's dive on into the extra deck. First up is going to be 2 copies of the brand new Daigusto Laplam Pilica. This is a level 6 synchro that says you can only special summon Daigusto Laplam Pilica once per turn. If this card is synchro summoned, you can special summon 1 Gusto monster from your hand and 1 Gusto monster from your deck, but negate their effects. Then, immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon 1 Gusto synchro monster using only those 2 monsters. Also, you're locked into win monsters. And then it says your opponent cannot target other Gusto synchro monsters you control with card effects. It does have 2600 defense, which is pretty nice. So the idea here is you can synchro summon out your Laplam Pilica, and then activate its effect to special summon out 2 other Gusto monsters, and then probably synchro those into your Sprees. And thanks to Laplam Pilica being on field, your opponent won't be able to target your Sprees with any potential card effects like Impermanence or Effect Veiler. So it just kind of helps protect your Sprees to, again, push for your OTKs. Really great support for the deck. It's not the OTK enabler, but it is a great additional resource for us to have. Now, you've been hearing me talk about her throughout the profile. We are playing double copies of Daigusto Sprees as well. Again, level 6 Synchro Monster. When she is Synchro Summoned, you can target 1 Gusto card in your graveyard, add that target to your hand, and your opponent takes any battle damage you would have taken from battles involving a face-up Gusto monster you control, and she cannot be destroyed by battle. So the whole strategy of the deck, if you're not familiar, if you haven't caught on, is we're going to Synchro Summon out our Sprees, and then we are going to use our smaller Gusto monsters like Eagle and Guldo to crash into our opponent's monster, dealing all of the damage to them. So if we have something like the Thunder Kaiju on board, for example, that's going to deal 3,000 damage to our opponent when we crash with most of our monsters. So really all we need is the Sprees and either a Guldo or an Eagle, and we should be able to push through lethal just by crashing into something like a Kaiju. And then for the other monsters in the extra deck, we do play the 1 Daigusto Goldos as a level 5 synchro option. This just says, once per turn, you can shuffle 2 Gusto monsters from your graveyard into the main deck, target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, and destroy it. You're not really going to find yourself going into this too much, but it is a removal option depending on if the game goes long or if you need to get a threat off board. We just have it there as another option for the deck. And then for our level 6, we have Virtual World Beast Jui. This card cannot be destroyed by battle or card effects while you have 2 or more monsters in your graveyard with the same original type and attribute, but different names. So if we have, for example, 2 of our Gusto Winged Beasts, we can bring this out, and it'll be kind of tough for our opponent to get over if maybe our plays got interrupted and we just kind of need to wall up and try to survive. This can be surprisingly hard for our opponent to out, actually. Then for our level 7 option, we have Clearwing Fast Dragon. He just takes 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner wind monster. And then during either player's turn, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls that was special summoned in the extra deck. Until the end of the turn, change its attack to 0 and negate its effects. So this is just a quick effect that we can use for some negation, maybe for Force to go first. We can at least get this out for some disruption. And it does also have the added ability that if it's in the monster zone and it's destroyed, you can place it in your pendulum zone. And then if it's in your pendulum zone, you can actually send 1 face-up Speedroid tuner and 1 face-up non-tuner you control to the graveyard to special summon itself back out from your pendulum zone. So you can potentially get this card out twice. But again, just a good wind option. Then we are playing the 1 Crystal Wing as our level 8 synchro. Again, it's wind. And then as a level 9 option, we are actually able to play Shin Shin. Again, just a great option for the deck if you are forced to go first or if the game goes long and you want to get some disruption options on board. Moving into the Link monsters, we have 1 Great Fly and 1 High Speedroid Rubber Band Shooter as our Link 2s. So Great Fly just increases the attack of all wind monsters by 500. So it can boost all of our Gustos up for some extra damage if we are not crashing into things. And then High Speedroid Rubber Band Shooter is actually a really interesting card. Just takes 2 wind monsters. That says during your main phase, you can immediately, after this effect resolves, normal summon 1 wind monster. And then you are locked into wind or synchro monsters for the rest of the turn. But again, most of our strategy does revolve around synchro monsters, so we don't care about that too much. And then you can banish 1 wind synchro monster from your extra deck, reveal 2 Speedroid monsters with different names from your deck, whose total levels equal the level of that synchro monster. Your opponent randomly picks 1 for you to add to your hand, and you send the other to the graveyard. That second effect we don't care about too much. We're really here for the first ability to get the additional summon. But again, just a good Link 2 wind monster. Then for our Link 3, we have the Samorg Bird of Sovereignty. We are side decking the Barrier Statue of the Stormwinds. So we can't expect our opponent to force us to go first in game 2 or 3. So we want to have that option when that does happen to hinder our opponent as much as possible. So you can easily get into your Samorg in most cases, and then you'll just use that to bring out your Stormwinds to slow down or shut down your opponent's turn. Then as our Link 4, we have Apollosa. She is a wind, and you can easily put several monsters on board to potentially get her out again, just as a disruption option if you go first. And then for our Exceeds monsters, we have the 1 Bamboozling Gossip Shadow and the 1 Totem Bird. Gossip Shadow just gives us some generic negation potential. Like I said, if you open up with a Terror Top, you can just go straight into Gossip Shadow to essentially blank one of your opponent's disruptions. Totem Bird's very similar. It just takes 2 level 3 wind monsters. And during either player's turn when a spell or trap card is activated, you can detach both materials from him, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy it. And then when he doesn't have materials, he loses 300 attack and defense. And that's actually going to do it for a profile, guys. Like I said, I really love what Gusto can do now with all this additional support. And as far as competitive Gusto goes, I really feel like this is the best way to build the deck. Most of the other Gusto monsters that were not included don't really do all that much for the archetype. They lend themselves to a much slower playstyle that doesn't really exist anymore in Yu-Gi-Oh! But let me know what you think of the profile overall. Do you think this is the best way to build it, or do you think there's still merit to those more classic Gusto cards? And as always, if you did enjoy the content, please hit that thumbs up button. It always helps us. And make sure you subscribe because we have a lot more from Dawn of Majesty coming up soon. Till next time, I'm Teague with Battle City Games.